Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to ask for a bit of support. As I've had some more time on my hands recently, I've been doing some work on the Sleepy Time Tales merch stores. I've got a whole lot of stuff up on the Redbubble store, and that's also going to be going up on TeePublic too. Not all of it is Sleepy Time Tales branded, but most of it is sleep themed. So things that work nicely as stickers, pillows, sleepwear and the like. So if you're in the market for some cutesy or funny stuff and would like to help support Sleepy Time Tales, please go take a look. I'm going to be putting something new up there most days pretty regularly, so it's worth keeping an eye on, and I'll be sharing highlights on Twitter and Facebook as well. So please follow Sleepy Time Tales there and keep an eye out on what's available, and maybe something will take your fancy. If you'd like to support Sleepy Time Tales a bit more directly to help me keep it going, please consider supporting on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on how much you contribute. From as little as $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on main episodes, so that you get your fresh sleep aid on a Wednesday instead of a Sunday, and $5 a month gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all of the previous month's releases in one big listen. But if monthly seems like a big ask, then you can make once-off tips in the tip jar on the website. On that note, I'd like to thank both Mary and Tim for throwing some funds in the jar late last month and early this month. It's very much appreciated, so shout-outs to both of you. Thank you so much. But another way to help Sleepy Time Tales is simply by spreading the word. You can help me in my mission to give more people a restful night's sleep, to do my small part, to do our small part, in improving their lives. If you tell people on social media, please make sure to tag me in at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter, so that I can see and I can thank you. And last but not least, of course, I've got to shout out the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. Their music is available on their website at royaltyfreakmusic.com. Thanks for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange thing, this strange idea, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to? But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night? Mind spinning and your emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night. Or maybe sometimes background noise or simply company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you without any pressure of the end coming. Now, as far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. The primary idea is that it gives you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties. To focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep. But maybe you need something a little bit different. Maybe you just need some kind of background noise. Some people like white noise, the sound of the ocean, sound of the rain, wind in the trees, Or maybe just some boring dude droning on in the background. What matters, though, is that you don't try to force the sleep. As I'm speaking, just listen and keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story, and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but don't feel pressurized. It may not work on the first night. Maybe it will take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is strange to you. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. Or maybe your problem isn't going to sleep. Maybe your problem is waking up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because it's what works for me, is to let the podcast run all night. In your podcast player of choice, just download a whole bunch of episodes, put them in a playlist, and then when you go to bed, start on the latest and let them go. That way, if you wake up in the middle of the night and the stream is still running, you can just pop your earbuds back in and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. Sometimes I even wake up 30 minutes before my alarm goes, or sometimes even 60 minutes. And I do the same thing. Carry on listening and go right back out to sleep again. And you may wonder what the point of that is. What does an extra 30 minutes help you in the context of a full night? And I've got to tell you that I've had people actually thank me for making the suggestion. Because there's something about allowing yourself to relax completely right before the alarm that's satisfying on a whole new, deep level. So it's very important that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you. So give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you. To create a safe space. A cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. We return once again to the Republic by Plato. Book 1. I went down yesterday to the Piraeus with Glaucon, the son of Ariston, that I might offer up my prayers to the goddess, Bendis, the Thracian Artemis, and also because I wanted to see in what manner they would celebrate the festival, which was a new thing. I was delighted with the procession of the inhabitants, but that of the Thracians was equally, if not more, beautiful. When we had finished our prayers and viewed the spectacle, we turned in the direction of the city, and in that instant Polemarchus, the son of Cephalus, chanced to catch sight of us from a distance as we were starting on our way home, and told his servant to run and bid us wait for him. The servant took hold of me by the cloak behind, and said, Polemarchus desires you to wait. I turned around and asked where his master was. There he is, said the youth, coming after you, if you will only wait. Certainly we will, said Glaucon, and in a few minutes Polemarchus appeared, and with him Adeimantus, Glaucon's brother, Niceratus, the son of Nicias, and several others who had been at the procession. Polemarchus said to me, I perceive, Socrates, that you and your companion are already on the way to the city. You are not far wrong, I said. But do you see, he rejoined, how many we are? Of course. And you stronger than all of these? For if not, you will have to remain where you are. May there not be the alternative, I said, that we may persuade you to let us go? But can you persuade us if we refuse to listen to you? He said. Certainly not, replied Glaucon. Then we are not going to listen. Of that you may be assured. Adeimantus added, Has no one told you of the torch race on horseback in honor of the goddess which will take place in the evening? With horses? I replied. That is a novelty. Will horsemen carry torches and pass them to one another during the race? Yes, said Polemarchus, and not only so, but a festival will be celebrated at night, which you certainly ought to see. Let us rise soon after supper and see this festival. There will be a gathering of young men, and we will have a good talk. Stay then, and do not be perverse. Glaucon said, I suppose, since you insist, that we must. Very good, I replied. Accordingly, we went with Polemarchus to his house, and there we found his brothers, Lysias and Euthydemus, and with them Thrasymachus the Chalcedonian, Charmantides the Panian, and Cleitophon the son of Aristonymus. There too was Cephalus, the father of Polemarchus, whom I had not seen for a long time, and I thought him very much aged. He was seated on a cushioned chair and had a garland on his head, for he had been sacrificing in the court, and there were some other chairs in the room arranged in a semicircle, upon which we sat down by him. He saluted me eagerly, and then he said, You don't come to see me, Socrates, as often as you ought. If I was still able to go and see you, I would not ask you to come to me. But at my age I can hardly get to the city, and therefore you should come oftener to the Piraeus. For let me tell you that the more the pleasures of the body fade away, the greater to me is the pleasure and charm of conversation. Do not then deny my request, but make our house your resort, and keep company with these young men. We are old friends, and you will be quite at home with us. I replied, There is nothing for my part which I like better, Cephalus, than conversing with aged men, for I regard them as travellers who have gone a journey which I too may have to go, and of whom I ought to inquire, whether the way is smooth and easy, or rugged and difficult. And this is a question which I should like to ask of you who have arrived at that time which the poets call the threshold of old age. Is life harder towards the end, or what report do you give of it? I will tell you, Socrates, he said, what my own feeling is. Men of my age flock together. We are birds of a feather, as the old proverb says. And at our meetings the tale of my acquaintance commonly is, I cannot eat, I cannot drink. The pleasures of youth and love are fled away. There was some good time once, but now that is gone, and life is no longer life. Some complain of the slights which are put upon them by relations, and they will tell you sadly of how many evils their old age is the cause. But to me, Socrates, these complainers seem to blame that which is not really in fault. For if old age were the cause, I too, being old, and every other old man, would have felt as they do. But this is not my own experience, nor that of others whom I have known. How well I remember the aged poet Sophocles, when in answer to the question, how does love suit with age? Sophocles, are you still the man you were? Peace, he replied, most gladly have I escaped the thing of which you speak. I feel as if I had escaped from a mad and furious master. His words have often occurred to my mind since, and they seem as good to me now as at the time when he uttered them. For certainly old age has a great sense of calm and freedom. When the passions relax their hold, then, as Sophocles says, we are freed from the grasp, not of one mad master only, but of many. The truth is, Socrates, that these regrets, and also the complaints about relations, are to be attributed to the same cause, which is not old age, but men's characters and tempers. For he who is of a calm and happy nature will hardly feel the pressure of age, but to him who is of an opposite disposition, youth and age are equally a burden. I listened in admiration, and wanting to draw him out, that he might go on. Yes, Cephalus, I said, But I rather suspect that people in general are not convinced by you when they speak thus. They think that old age sits slightly upon you, not because of your happy disposition, but because you are rich, and wealth is well known to be a great comforter. You are right, he replied. They are not convinced, and there is something in what they say. Not, however, so much as they imagine. I might answer them as Themistocles answered the Seriphian who was abusing him, and saying that he was famous, not for his own merits, but because he was an Athenian. If you had been a native of my country, or I of yours, neither of us would have been famous. And to those who are not rich and are impatient of old age, the same reply may be made. For to the good poor man old age cannot be a light burden, nor can a bad rich man ever have peace with himself. May I ask, Cephalus, whether your fortune was for the most part inherited or acquired by you? Acquired. Socrates, do you want to know how much I acquired? In the art of making money, I have been midway between my father and grandfather. For my grandfather, whose name I bear, doubled and trebled the value of his patrimony, that which he inherited being much that I possess now. But my father Lysanias reduced the property below what it is at present, and I shall be satisfied if I leave to these my sons not less, but a little more than I received. That was why I asked you the question, I replied, because I see that you are indifferent about money, which is a characteristic rather of those who have inherited their fortunes than of those who have acquired them. The makers of fortunes have a second love of money as a creation of their own, resembling the affection of authors for their own poems, or of parents for their children, besides that natural love of it for the sake of use and profit, which is a common to them and all men. And hence they are very bad company, for they can talk about nothing but the praises of wealth. That is true, he said. Yes, that is very true. But may I ask you another question? What do you consider to be the greatest blessing which you have reaped from your wealth? One, he said, of which I could not expect easily to convince others. For let me tell you, Socrates, that when a man thinks himself to be near death, fears and cares enter into his mind, which he never had before. The tales of a world below and the punishment which is exacted there of deeds done here were once a laughing matter to him. But now he is tormented with the thought that they may be true, either from the weakness of age or because he is now drawing nearer to that other place. He has a clearer view of these things. Suspicions and alarms crowd thickly upon him, and he begins to reflect and consider what wrongs he has done to others. And when he finds that the sum of his transgressions is great, he will many a time, like a child, start up in his sleep for fear, and he is filled with dark forebodings. But to him who is conscious of no sin, sweet hope, as Pindar charmingly says, is the kind nurse of his age. Hope, he says, cherishes the soul of him who lives in justice and holiness, and is the nurse of his age, and the companion of his journey. Hope which is mightiest to sway the restless soul of man. How admirable are his words, and the great blessing of riches. I do not say to every man, but to a good man, is that he has no occasion to deceive or to defraud others, either intentionally or unintentionally. And when he departs to the world below, he is not in any apprehension about offerings due to the gods or debts to which he owes men. Now, to this peace of mind, the possession of wealth greatly contributes, and therefore I say that, setting one thing against another, of the many advantages which wealth has to give to a man of sense, this is in my opinion the greatest. Well said, Cephalus, I replied. But as concerning justice, what is it? To speak the truth and to pay your debts, no more than this? And even to this are there not exceptions? Suppose that a friend, when in his right mind, has deposited alms with me, and he asks for them when he is not in his right mind. Ought I to give them back to him? No one would say that I ought, or that I should be right in doing so, any more than they would say that I always ought to speak the truth to one who is in his condition. You're quite right, he replied. But then, I said, speaking the truth and paying your debt is not a correct definition of justice. Quite correct, Socrates, if Simonides is to be believed, said Polemarchus, interposing. I fear, said Cephalus, that I must go now, for I have to look after the sacrifices. And I hand over the argument to Polemarchus and the company. Is not Polemarchus your heir? I said. To be sure, he answered, and went away laughing to the sacrifices. Tell me then, O thou heir of the argument, what did Simonides say, and according to you truly say, about justice? He said that the repayment of a debt is just, and in saying so he appears to me to be right. I should be sorry to doubt the word of such a wise and inspired man. But his meaning, though probably clear to you, is the reverse of clear to me. For he certainly does not mean, as we were just now saying, that I ought to return a deposit of alms of anything else to one who asks for it, when he is not in his right senses, and yet a deposit cannot be denied to a debt. True. Then, when the person who asks me is not in his right mind, I am by no means to make the return? Certainly not. When Simonides said that the repayment of a debt was justice, did he not mean to include that case? Certainly not. For he thinks that a friend ought always to do good to a friend and never evil. You mean that the return of a deposit of gold, which is to the injury of the receiver, if the two parties are friends, is not the repayment of a debt. That is what you would imagine him to say. Yes. And are enemies also to receive what we owe to them? To be sure, he said, they are to receive what we owe them. And an enemy, as I take it, owes to an enemy that which is due or proper to him, that is to say, evil. Simonides, then, after the manner of poets, would seem to have spoken darkly of the nature of justice. For he really meant to say that justice is the giving to each man what is proper to him, and this he termed a debt. That must have been his meaning, he said. By heaven, I replied. And if we asked him what due or proper thing is given by medicine, and to whom, what answer do you think he would make to us? He would surely reply that medicine gives drugs and meat and drink to human bodies. And what due or proper thing is given by cookery, and to what? Seasoning to food. And what is that which justice gives, and to whom? If, Socrates, we are to be guided at all by the analogy of the preceding instances, then justice is the art which gives good to friends and evil to enemies. That is his meaning, then? I think so. And who is best able to do good to his friends and evil to his enemies in the time of sickness? The physician? Or when they are on a voyage amid the perils of the sea? The pilot? And what sort of actions, or with a view to what results, is the just man most able to do harm to his enemy and good to his friend? In going to war against the one and in making alliances with the other. But when a man is well, my dear Polemarchus, there is no need of a physician. No. And who is not on a voyage has no need of a pilot. No. Then in time of peace justice will be of no use. I am very far from thinking so. You think that justice may be of use in peace as well in war? Yes. Like husbandry for the acquisition of corn? Yes. Or like shoemaking for the acquisition of shoes, that is what you mean? Yes. And what similar use or power of acquisition has justice in time of peace? In contracts, Socrates, justice is of use. And by contracts, you mean partnerships. Exactly. But is the just man or the skillful player a more useful and better partner at a game of drafts? The skillful player. And in the laying of bricks and stones, is the just man a more useful or better partner than the builder? Quite the reverse. Then in what sort of partnership is the just man a better partner than the harp player? As in playing the harp player is certainly a better partner than the just man. In a money partnership? Yes, Polemarchus, but surely not in the use of money. For you do not want a just man to be your counselor in the purchase or sale of a horse. A man who is knowing about horses would be better for that, would he not? Certainly. And when you want to buy a ship, the shipwright or the pilot would be better. True. Then what is that joint use of silver or gold in which the just man is to be preferred? When you want a deposit to be kept safely. You mean when money is not wanted but allowed to lie? Precisely. That is to say, justice is useful when money is useless. That is the inference. And when you want to keep pruning hooks safe, then justice is useful to the individual and to the state. But when you want to use it, then the art of the vine dresser. Clearly. And when you want to keep a shield or lyre, and not to use them, you would say that justice is useful. But when you want to use them, then the art of the soldier, of the musician. Certainly. And so of all other things, justice is useful when they are useless, and useless when they are useful. That is the inference. Then justice is not good for much. But let us consider this further point. Is not he who can best strike a blow in a boxing match, or in any kind of fighting, best able to ward off a blow? Certainly. And he who is most skillful in preventing or escaping from a disease is best able to create one. True. And he is the best guard of a camp who is best able to steal a march upon the enemy. Certainly. Then who is a good keeper of anything is also a good thief. That, I suppose, is to be inferred. Then if the just man is good at keeping money, he is good at stealing it. That is implied in the argument. Then after all, the just man has just turned out to be a thief. And this is a lesson which I suspect you must have learnt out of Homer. For he, speaking of Autolycus, the maternal grandfather of Odysseus, who is a favourite of his, affirms that he was excellent above all men in theft and perjury. And so you, Homer, and Simonides agreed that justice is an art of theft, to be practiced, however, for the good of friends and harm of enemies. That was what you were saying? No, certainly not that, though I do not now know what I did say, but I still stand by the latter words. Well, there is another question. By friends and enemies, do we mean those who are so really, or only in seeming? Surely, he said, a man may be expected to love those whom he thinks good, and to hate those whom he thinks evil. Yes, but do not persons often err about good and evil? Many who are not good seem to be so, and conversely. That is true. Then to them the good will be enemies, and the evil will be their friends. True. And in that case, they will be right in doing good to the evil and evil to the good. Clearly. But the good are just, and would not do an injustice. True. Then, according to your argument, is it just to injure those who do no wrong? Nay, Socrates, the doctrine is immoral. Then I suppose that we ought to do good to the just, and harm to the unjust. I like that better. But see the consequences. Many a man who is ignorant of human nature has friends who are bad friends, and in that case he ought to do harm to them. And he has good enemies whom he ought to benefit. But if so, we shall be saying the very opposite of that which we affirmed to be the meaning of Simonides. Very true, he said. And I think that we had better correct an error into which we seem to have fallen in the use of the words friend and enemy. What was the error, Polemarchus asked? We assumed that he is a friend who seems to be, or is thought to be good. And how is the error to be corrected? We should say that he is a friend who is, as well as seems, good, and that who seems only and is not good, only seems to be and is not a friend, and of an enemy the same may be said. You would argue that the good are our friends and the bad our enemies. Yes. And instead of saying simply as we did at first, that it is just to do good to our friends and harm to our enemies, we should further say it is just to do good to our friends when they are good, and harm to our enemies when they are evil. Yes, that appears to me to be the truth. But ought the just to injure anyone at all? Undoubtedly he ought to injure those who are both wicked and his enemies. When horses are injured, are they improved or deteriorated? The latter. Deteriorated. That is to say, in the good qualities of horses, not of dogs. Yes, of horses. And dogs are deteriorated in the good qualities of dogs and not of horses. Of course. And will not men who are injured be deteriorated in that which is the proper virtue of man? Certainly. And that human virtue is justice. To be sure. Then men who are injured are of necessity made unjust. That is the result. But can the musician by his art make men unmusical? Certainly not. Or the horseman by his art make them bad horsemen? Impossible. And can the just by justice make men unjust, or speaking generally, can the good by virtue make them bad? Assuredly not. Any more than heat can produce cold. It cannot. Or drought moisture. Clearly not. Nor can the good harm anyone. Impossible. And the just as the good. Certainly. Then to injure a friend or anyone else is not the act of a just man, but of the opposite, who is unjust. I think that what you say is quite true, Socrates. Then if a man says that justice consists in the repayment of debts, and that good is the debt of which a just man owes to his friends, and evil the debt which he owes to his enemies, to say this is not wise, for it is not true, if has been clearly shown the injuring of another can be in no case just. I agree with you, said Polemarchus. Then you and I are prepared to take up arms against anyone who attributes such a saying to Simonides or Bios or Pittacus or any other wise man or seer. I'm quite ready to do battle at your side, he said. Shall I tell you whose I believe the saying to be? Whose? I believe that Periander or Pericles or Xerxes or Asimenius the Theban or some other rich and mighty man, who had a great opinion of his own power, was the first to say that justice is doing good to your friends and harm to your enemies. Most true, he said. Yes, I said. But if this definition of justice also breaks down, what other can be offered? Several times in the course of the discussion, Thrasymachus had made an attempt to get the argument into his own hands, and had been put down by the rest of the company, who wanted to hear the end. But when Polemarchus and I had done speaking, and there was a pause, he could no longer hold his peace, and gathering himself up became at us like a wild beast seeking to devour us. We were quite panic-stricken at the sight of him. He roared out to the whole company, "What folly, Socrates, has taken possession of you all? And why, silly billies, do you knock under to one another? I say that if you want really to know what justice is, you should not only ask, but answer. And you should not seek honor to yourself from the refutation of an opponent, but have your own answer, for there is many a one who can ask and cannot answer. And now I will not have you say that justice is duty or advantage or profit or gain or interest, for this sort of nonsense will not do for me. I must have clearness and accuracy." I was panic-stricken at his words and could not look at him without trembling. Indeed, I believe that if I had not fixed my eye upon him, I should have been struck dumb. But when I saw his fury rising, I looked at him first, and was therefore able to reply to him. "Thrasymachus," I said, with a quiver, "don't be hard upon us. Polemarchus and I may have been guilty of a little mistake in the argument, but I can assure you that the error was not intentional. If we were seeking for a piece of gold, you would not imagine that we were knocking under to one another, and so losing our chance of finding it. And why, when we are seeking for justice, a thing more precious than many pieces of gold, do you say that we are weakly yielding to one another, and not doing our utmost to get at the truth? Nay, my good friend, we are most willing and anxious to do so, but the fact is that we cannot. And if so, you people who know all things should pity us and not be angry with us." "How characteristic of Socrates," he replied with a bitter laugh. "That's your ironical style. Didn't I not foresee, have I not already told you, that whatever he was asked he would refuse to answer, and try irony or some other shuffle, in order that he might avoid answering?" "You are a philosopher, Thrasymachus," I replied, "and well know that if you ask a person what numbers make up 12, taking care to prohibit him whom you ask from answering twice 6, or 3 times 4, or 6 times 2, or 4 times 3, for this sort of nonsense will not do for me, then obviously, if that is your way of putting the question, no one can answer you. But suppose that he were to retort, 'Thrasymachus, what do you mean?' If one of these numbers which you interdict be the true answer to the question, am I falsely to say some other number which is not the right one? Is that your meaning? How would you answer that?" "Just as if the two cases were at all alike," he said. "Why should they not be?" I replied. "And even if they are not, but only appear to be so to the person who is asked, ought he not to say what he thinks, whether you or I forbid him or not?" "I presume, then, that you are going to make one of the interdicted answers, I dare say that I may, notwithstanding the danger, if upon reflection I approve of any of them. But what if I give you an answer about justice, other and better, he said, than any of these? What do you deserve to have done to you? Done to me? As becomes the ignorant, I must learn from the wise. That is what I deserve to have done to me. What? And no payment? A pleasant notion. I will pay when I have the money, I replied. But you have, Socrates, said Glaucon, and you, Thrasymachus, need be under no anxiety about money, for we will all make a contribution for Socrates. Yes, he replied, and then Socrates will do as he always does, refuse to answer himself, but take and pull to pieces the answer of someone else. Why, my good friend, I said, how can anyone answer who knows, and says that he knows just nothing, and who, even if he has some faint notions of his own, is told by a man of authority not to utter them? The natural thing is that the speaker should be someone like yourself, who professes to know and can tell you what he knows. Will you then kindly answer for the edification of the company and of myself? Glaucon and the rest of the company joined in my request, and Thrasymachus, as anyone might see, was in reality eager to speak, for he thought that he had an excellent answer and would distinguish himself. But at first he affected to insist on my answering. At length he consented to begin. Behold, he said, the wisdom of Socrates, who refuses to teach himself and goes about learning of others, to whom he never even says thank you. That I learn of others, I replied, is quite true, but that I'm ungrateful I wholly deny. Money I have none, and therefore I pay in praise, which is all I have. And how ready I am to praise anyone who appears to me to speak well, you will very soon find out when you answer, for I expect that you will answer well. And I'm going to call it there for tonight. It's a bit of an interesting read, this one, running around in circles like a cat chasing its tail. Very much doubt anyone has made it this far tonight, because I definitely wouldn't have. I nearly fell asleep reading this. Anyway, thanks for joining us. See you again soon. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.